Hi, everybody. We are just getting started. We'll give everyone a few minutes to get on here. Yeah, I see the numbers climbing. We had lots of interest in the session today, and we're so happy. So many of you were interested in coming and have decided to join us. I don't know where you're located. You're welcome to put it in the chat. I'm east of Toronto in a little town called Brooklyn, and it's a balmy 2 degrees here today. What about you, Sherry? Where are you coming to us from?
I'm the opposite of you. I am in Oakville, the other side of Toronto.
Yeah.
Oh, I just saw, the hammer right by me. Oh, the Philippines.
Philippines. I think that you are the person who's joined us from further away than anyone. Uxbridge. Nice.
We'll see.
Love Uxbridge.
Amazing.
Pickering. I have a neighbor in here. You have a neighbor there, Kitchener.
Cool.
Wow, Hamilton. I have some roots in Hamilton.
I'm from Waterloo.
All over the place. Okay, Marla, London, Ontario, or London, England? Wow, India. This is amazing.
Oh, Marla is London, Ontario. Yeah, because I know Marla.
I have my London mug today, so I was like,
oh yes, because you lived in London.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, quite a few of you are from, it looks like I keep seeing Philippines come up. So wow, that's great. Thanks so much, everyone from London, Ontario. Thanks for amplifying, Kate. All right, well, thanks so much for joining us today. You know, for Sherry and I, a lot of our world is employee onboarding, and we learn tons from our clients, and we think about onboarding all the time. Someone just said it's sorry, I have to interrupt to say this. It's 2 a.m. in Philippines. I hope that you love this session.
No kidding. Thank you. Impressed.
Yeah. Maybe now is a bad time to mention that it's actually being recorded, and we will share the replay, but we are super glad to have you here, Eleanor, so please don't leave. But this is our world, right? And we learn a lot, and we know that when we work with our clients, it's only a small part of what they're doing. So we thought we would bring together a lot of our learning today so that we could share it with all of you. For any of you that I haven't met, I noticed a lot of new people signed up for this session today that I haven't met before. I'm Amy Davies, and I run a company called First 30. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a second. And Sherry is my partner at First 30 for the onboarding area of the business, but she also runs her own great consulting firm. So Sherry, I'll give you a second to introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Amy. So hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. As Amy mentioned, I partner with her on First 30 for the onboarding solution. And I also have an HR consulting firm called Loft Consulting, where we focus a lot on employee engagement and culture and outsourced HR solutions for small companies. So
yeah, and fun fact about Sherry and I, we met on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yeah, and like that was years ago now, and we got to know each other just for comments on each other's posts, and then a few years later, here we are working together, and it's been amazing.
Yeah.
I wanted to, for a moment, and Sherry, if you don't mind, I sent a link as well.
Yes,
if you could maybe put it up in the chat, to acknowledge the fact that, you know, this is a really difficult time right now. And we want to make sure everyone knew we're a bit distracted. We appreciate that everyone on the call might be a bit distracted today about what's going on in the Ukraine. If you find this session interesting and you are able to do it, we totally understand if you can't, but we've made a donation to the Red Cross on behalf of today and all the support you guys have given us by attending. If you're able, we'd encourage anyone to give a small donation. We don't ever charge for our sessions, but if you can and you're able and any charitable organization is fine. We've put in the link to the Red Cross in the chat, which you can go to if you feel you can and you have a desire to make that donation, because as we know, every little bit does really help. So anyway, shifting gears, we just want you to know we want to have fun today, but it's always in the back of our mind. So a little bit about First 30, and then we'll launch in. We have an onboarding program that we create software that's customized for our clients. So it's really used to reinforce learning. So you can store all your training, videos about your business. It's not there to replace that people interaction, but really so all of the resources are held in this one place, and it's fed out in bite-sized chunks. Of course, it would look like your business. We've got our little Integro company there, that it would look like your business, and your resource library would be where all of the things are held, like benefits information, EAP information that you might always want your employees to go back to. Right now, we are running free onboarding audits for people. I think Sherry might have the link to book that, and
Yep.
we'll send it an email afterwards so that you have the information. If you want to book a free onboarding audit, we only have about 5 spots left. They've been very popular for March. But if you really say like, Amy, we really want this audit, reach out to me. I'll do my best to find a time when both Sherry and I are available to do it. We'd also love that if you book, please show up, because there's a lot of people that want to book them. And then, of course, if someone doesn't show up, that means that another organization has lost that opportunity. So that's that. The last thing First 30 does is we do outplacements. So when layoffs occur, and we don't always like to talk about it, but it does happen, we have a very cost-effective, really great outplacement services. We have about a 90% success rate of our users finding jobs within 3 months. So we've just been thrilled with how this program has been performing. So you can always reach out to me about that anytime. So, and I know that Sherry put my little Calendly link in there. And you can use that to book. We'll also send you an email after with this information. So when we think about the importance of onboarding, and I know it's one of those things that often certain people leaders, HR leaders, and employers know is really important, but like, how do you get buy-in from the organization? Because sometimes it's not the forefront for a lot of, other departments. There's so many other priorities for the business. We don't talk a lot about imprinting in organizations, and I've never understood why that's the case. What happens when we have our first interactions, whether it's with a person, whether it's with a restaurant? I mean, think about the first time you went to a restaurant. It probably set whether you loved it or hated it from that very first, experience at that restaurant. So what happens is it's a highly receptive period when we start with a new organization. And that first impression can leave a long-lasting behavioral response. And that's why when Sherry and I talk about onboarding affecting retention, that's because your commitment to that organization may be formed within those first few days when you're onboarding. Mm-hmm. And what's happening, if you imagine, it's like your new employee is getting this blueprint on their brain. And from there, they build what is called a belief system. And that belief system, once established, can be very difficult, if not impossible, to change. So when you think about, there's actually a great example when it comes to children and vaccination. So there's people who think that vaccinations cause autism, and the medical community just wanted parents to be getting their children immunized because they were seeing the immunization rates drop. They went to market with a campaign to say, these vaccinations won't cause autism, don't worry, please get your children vaccinated. Nothing changed, right? Because you're not going to convince someone who's has an established belief system to change their behavior or their ideas about something. So they went back to market, they presented it as, here's the worst that could happen, and here are some real life cases where the worst has happened, please get your children vaccinated. So rather than fighting against an established belief system, they created a new, more immediate and terrifying belief system, right? And then people started getting their children back. They saw the vaccination rates go way up. Well, what does that really have to do with onboarding? It's just to say that once that belief system is established, just how hard it is to change. And I know that some of our clients at First 30 are using our platform to actually reboard their employees who have started in the last couple of years because their experience hasn't been quite the same, and they might have missed a few beats. So it's a nice time and a nice way to build a new belief system. But whether you're working with us or not, might be something worth considering. How do we kind of build that new belief system if we had a little bit of trouble when everyone was working remotely? I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sesame Street. I was a big fan as a kid, but there is this segment that's which of these things is not like the other. And what we want to do it made me think of this with onboarding, because what we want to do when people come into an organization, we want them to feel as though they belong. Right. And that is a lot of the advice we're giving you today is really about that end goal, whether it's about learning the organization, meeting the people, feeling like they know the language. All of those things are ways that people can feel like they belong. And that's really what we're after. All right, so what we're going to do today is a little bit different, and you'll need your chat to do it. What we're going to do is we don't have an order for this presentation. So it's like a little choose your own adventure. So we're going to ask you to, in the chat, you are going to tell us the number that you're most interested in. So each of these pictures and objects has either a story or a lesson to it. And we're going to talk to you about that. And then we're going to, okay, we've already got one. So the first person to get in there, you'll have to wait for the next one to be put up. So I think we got 2, right?
Yep,
Sherry?
number 2. Okay, that's
Okay.
me. That's me.
Okay, I'm just going to get my clicker on here. Okay, there you go, Sherry.
Okay, so Amy, I don't know if you know this, audience, I don't know if you know this, but frogs are actually indicator species. So they breathe through their skin. So if there's a lot of frogs in an environment, it actually means that it's a great and healthy environment. So if you see a lot of frogs around you, don't be worried, actually be very happy. Just be careful not to step on them. So
yeah. Well, the spring is coming, so I'm sure that we're all going to be thinking about that when we get out and see hopefully a lot of frogs around.
Let's hope we see them.
Yeah.
So how is that connected to onboarding? So really what we want to remind everybody is that it's really important that we create that great environment right from the get-go. So having the ability to link your team members' jobs to the company's purpose and help demonstrate the health of the business, maybe share financial information, share the company's goals, all of those types of things really help the new team member understand that it's a great environment that they're joining. So here are some concrete tips. And remember, it's important to demonstrate the great work environment early and also to demonstrate it often. So how can we do that? One tip is to provide managers and new team members with information about the corporate values, the mission, the vision. And not just provide information about that, actually help them understand, how does my job connect to those things? What are the demonstrated behaviors? What are some of the things that I can do to show up and make sure that I'm living the values every single day? That's really important for new team members because, as you know, values, sometimes the words have different meanings. So what does this word communication mean in this organization? Then it's also really helpful to provide and offer some interactive exercises that can help encourage new employees to connect what they do with the greater business. So, maybe you can have a Q&A session, or maybe you can have case studies that they can kind of go through that actually allows them to really understand how that values, mission, vision, and other greater objectives help to connect with the business. And then there's also an opportunity to share the features that help make your business special and a great place to work. So, maybe you do Friday team lunches. Maybe you do like little things that your company does that you might take for granted if you've worked there a long time that new people really want to know about. So that's the frog.
Thanks. So we had a question just about, will the presentation be shared? Yes, we will share the replay on Friday. You'll get a note with the replay. If for any reason you don't receive it, please let me know, and I can make sure. If you just check your junk too, because sometimes our emails get demoted. People are raising their hands. What I'd suggest is maybe write your comments. We'll keep a lookout for them in the chat. We'd be happy to answer your questions as we go. So yeah, if you have questions as we're speaking, just throw them in the Q&A and we can answer. We have time for a Q&A at the end, but if you want to pop in some questions there, by all means, go right ahead and do that. But now, it's decision time. What are we going to talk about next? 10.
10.
Okay, we
Somebody
got it.
was right ready. Somebody was right ready.
Yeah, I know somebody was ready. Jean, that was good. That was really moving quickly.
Okay.
Okay. So one of the things that we always recommend is that, you know, we want to be, when it comes to onboarding and just the employee experience in general, to make sure that we're always seeking two-way feedback. And when I think about this, it's like, you remember being in a situation where you're in a store, for instance, and you give feedback to somebody, like maybe your cart couldn't get around something that was in the lane, and you give the feedback to the person who works in the store. There was probably 30 people behind you that also weren't able to get through, but never said anything. And my background is actually in research. So I know that if one person says something, speaks up and says something, then it probably means that there's many other people who couldn't, who had the same experience. And so we need to take that feedback seriously, like the feedback we were given at the beginning of the session, right? Now I'm going to take that on because there may be other people that need that accessibility or need something like that, right? So we make sure that if we don't ask, you're often not going to get, right? That's what I always say. You don't ask, you don't get. So we want to make sure that we get that feedback to, invite people to offer solutions, but also to set the tone for open communication. Because sometimes if you're not asking, employees might not feel comfortable giving feedback. Whenever I give feedback to users in our outplacement program, I always ask them first, do you want feedback on your LinkedIn profile, right? Because there's nothing worse than getting feedback that you don't really want, right?
Unsolicited advice.
Unsolicited advice. So how do we actually make this happen? Well, we always suggest that the feedback is encouraged through actual check-ins, that those are built into the onboarding process. And those check-ins should, if you have an HR department, definitely once in a while you want new employees to check in with HR or whoever is responsible for the overall onboarding experience. But sometimes the feedback won't be related to onboarding specifically, but you definitely want to build check-ins with their manager. And you also want to encourage not just check-ins, but 1-over-1 meetings. And when we say 1-over-1, what we really mean is to have meetings with their manager's manager, because oftentimes certain things you want going through the person's manager, but you want to also open up the lines of communication with that manager's manager, right? There's some things might be happening that shouldn't be happening, and they need to feel comfortable going to other people in the organization, or great things might be happening. Give them an opportunity to tell more than just their manager. Sherry, I don't know if you've had experience with these 1-over-1 meetings as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important way to actually break down barriers of hierarchy within organization too. So it just allows that extra open door. It's a fantastic way to formalize it early.
Yeah, for sure. And then providing short feedback surveys, they don't have to be complicated. If you're looking for ideas for questions, I mean, Sherry and I do this, so you're more than welcome to ask us what questions we might suggest. But just to assess their level of engagement. And then if you can see that there's an issue early on, it can be addressed early on so that you have an in and an opportunity and something might not be working well. And then you're also getting feedback on the overall onboarding experience. And then have an intervention strategy prepared in advance, right? Like what if, and you might want to kind of sit and have a strategy session about what you would do if, with people managers as part of their training as new managers and managing people who are onboarding. What happens if you notice that this is not working out? What do we do then? Because what a lot of people in organizations don't appreciate is it's really expensive when someone leaves the organization. You have to start all over again and recruit someone new. So maybe there are ways to fix the situation, and intervening early is a really good way to make sure that you keep the person in the employee on track and figure out what may be going wrong. Create an environment that encourages open and honest feedback. And one of the best ways to do that is just be real with employees, and don't make it sound like it's all perfect. Say, you know, when I started, this is what I really found tough to get used to in the organization. So showing a little vulnerability is always a great way to get that, to create that environment of openness. There's, you know, I've been in organizations before where there was really very little critiques by employees and it wasn't welcomed. And then you feel like, oh, I can't say anything to anybody if things aren't going right. And it kind of shuts down that communication.
I wanted just to add a little piece here, because I think sometimes when the feedback isn't invited and then it's offered and then it's not received well, that really does shut the door. Or if it's invited and it's not received well, it shuts the door. And so I have actually seen it where employees come with a lot of ideas, like they're new, they don't know a lot about what's happened in the past or what, you know, the direction going forward is, and they come with tons of ideas. And managers shut them down right away and say, oh, we've tried that before, or we've, you know, really keeping that open mind and or helping guide the employee of what type of feedback will be really helpful to keep that two-way lines of communication open.
And Sherry, you do, if there's anyone on the call who's looking to set up employee surveys, by all means, reach out to Sherry. Sherry, you might want to pop your email in the chat too, because I don't think we have it anywhere in this. Yeah, Sherry runs surveys as well. So she would be a great resource if you're looking for someone to do this. Okay. Oh, you are ready, Larry.
Oh,
and two people wanted 4, so I feel like we're making 2 people very happy.
Okay, very nice. Good. And we're actually going back and forth on it.
Yeah, we're going back and forth. This is perfect. Yeah.
So this is a metronome. And as we know, the metronome really sets the tone, right? It sets the tempo. And so it's really important to keep the metronome in the back of your head, because it's setting the tempo not only for the new hire, but also for the team. And so it helps somebody really understand what is expected of me and how I work, and what is expected of me when I enter a new team, and how can we really work well together. And so really this is about helping people understand job expectations early. And that includes job descriptions, but it also includes things like what will I be evaluated on, when, and how. So if you want to go to the next slide there, Amy.
Sure.
So here are some tips on how to keep that metronome ticking.
I don't know. I'm just like, I'm having memories of piano lessons right now.
I wish I took piano lessons. Are you kidding? I would have loved it. So one thing is to ensure that the job description is made accessible to new employees. Often we actually forget that. It's an oversight. So really providing them with the role clarity and the role expectation right up front is really, really important. And then helping them understand, what does success look like? So what is success in 1 week? What is success in 3 weeks? What is success in 3 months, etc.? I don't know if everybody has seen the learning curve, but where you start off and then you kind of go through the journey. And as you're going through the journey, you're gaining confidence and competence. Well, no matter where you start, and no matter when you start or what level you start at, everybody goes through that experience where you don't know what you don't know, and then you start to know what you don't know. And it becomes very scary when you start to know what you don't know. So helping to establish the expectations of the job and being mindful of the fact that everybody's not going to be performing at their optimal levels right at the beginning is really, really helpful and critical. And then it's also helpful for people to understand how and when am I going to be evaluated. So oftentimes we do have formal performance evaluation processes in place, but it kind of sneaks up on people. So why not include that right from day one? You know, here's when you're going to be evaluated and here's what you're going to be evaluated on, so that people can really help set themselves up for success. So those are a few of our tips on that one.
Yeah, and I think one big miss when it comes to performance reviews, can fall to either the person, who's getting the performance review or the person who's giving it, is that you'll sit down and the person will be like, well, I want to get a promotion to become a senior manager from a manager. And then their manager says to them, well, you needed to do this, this, and this to get to that. But if they had that conversation earlier on, and then they would have been ready. So if they knew how they would have been measured, or you can somehow build that in, then it's really good. But I also wanted to say, Sherry, it's never too late to start piano lessons, by the way.
Okay, well.
In the same way, it's never too late to share a job description, right? Because I do find that people sometimes they lose track of what that job description says. So it's actually a nice little reminder, and it's actually really good to bring into performance reviews. I just know that I've been shocked when I've looked back years later at my job description. Yeah. I don't know if anyone's had that experience.
Especially if you've been in the same job for a long time, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I keep clicking on it. Okay. I can't see the end of the chat, Sherry. You're going to have to tell me.
I just saw 6 come up right away.
Okay, you saw 6 come up first. I'm seeing 8, but you saw 6. So we're going to go with 6 if no one's arguing. And that's perfect, because guess what?
There you go. It's you.
It's me this time. So I'm sure we're all familiar with this kitchen instrument, but our memories are fragile. And this is something I learned in the marketing field. We used to go and talk to people about the products they bought the week before. And imagine they couldn't even remember the brands that they purchased. And it's because we have so many things going through our minds all the time. It's like, how are we going to get the things that we need to be sticky? And Sherry laughed at me a few weeks ago. We were on a call and I forgot what the memory book was that I was reading, what it was called. It's called Remember. I now know.
Oh, you're
and I
kidding.
made sure to pay attention, because that's one of the things she says is pay attention, because I had it on Kindle. And so I wasn't looking at the cover of the book. So I didn't remember. But the last time I looked at it on my Kindle, I'm like, Amy, take this in. So I highly recommend that book. But when somebody is onboarding with your organization, their memory is like a sieve. They're meeting all kinds of new people at one time. They're getting all kinds of new information. And guess what? They're nervous. Like, I'm a pretty extroverted person, but like when I start a new job, I get so nervous and I'm really uncomfortable for those first few days. And my discomfort is actually distracting from all of the learning that I should have been doing.
I wanted to jump in there because you're so right. It's one of those things where we forget. And sometimes when you take the trainer role, like if you're in HR or if you're responsible for onboarding, you're a little nervous too, but you're forgetting actually that the person who's receiving the information is nervous. So maybe neither of us are really at our optimal levels. So, well, some of us probably are very skilled at it, but that is a really good point. They're thinking about they're not just thinking about the learning material. They're thinking about, how am I showing up?
Yeah.
How am I being perceived? What do I need to know? What should I say next? Really good. I'm going to put the name.
Sammy, is that a joke? What's the name of the book? It's called Remember.
I'm putting it in.
Yeah, just type it in there. You can get it on. So, all right, I'm going to go to the next slide. Sherry, I've just noticed a few questions popping up in the Q&A. Maybe while I'm going through this slide, you might want to just jump on there and see if there's anything we need to talk about now. And we also have some time hopefully we'll have time for a Q&A at the end as well. All right. So what we want to try to do as much as possible is to offer up training and information in bite-sized chunks. So sometimes when we're teaching something that's very familiar to us, we forget that it's very new to someone at a time where they might be feeling a little vulnerable and distracted by what kind of perception they're giving off. And actually one great example of this is, how often do you meet people at a conference, or, not that we remember we're going to conferences like anymore, but think back, way back to when you were going to conferences and someone would introduce themselves and a few minutes later you'd be like, oh my goodness, I can't remember their name and here they come again. So it's really important, if you can't even remember a name in a situation where you might be, feeling overwhelmed, how difficult will it be to learn all kinds of new systems and training and all this sort of thing. So really make sure that we're serving this up in bite-sized chunks and continually reinforcing the learning. Pace introductions to the team. I remember one day I started at a company that was so friendly, but I'm telling you, 60 people came to my door that very first day, no joke. And almost everyone, in addition to coming, the position that I filled had been vacant for a long time. And when they came, they were saying, oh my goodness, we're so glad you're here. We really need, it's like I was already behind and I hadn't even started because they really needed the type of support I was going to offer the organization. And I just felt so scared and overwhelmed. So to the extent that you can, and if you're introducing someone who's working remote, just limit those team meetings to maybe a few people and have it moderated by one person instead of having like 10 team members all on the same call. And then we want to, again, reinforce that in-person learning with exercises. With our clients, we always recommend, if they're learning a technology or ways to submit expenses, I'm sure like all of us are thinking, oh my goodness, when I go to submit my expenses every 3 to 6 months, I forget how to use the system again. Wouldn't it be great to have a narrated video? I work in the tech area, right? What we do is HR tech. So I've learned to like watch those videos where they narrate and say, okay, now you need to click here and then you do this. So that if you could have task-based video training that is available to your new employees or you'd be surprised how many people would take you up on this offer. Think about how much time you would save the people leaders who might also forget and the HR team if the employees didn't have to keep going back to them to get, it's tax time. I bet a lot of you are being asked for T4s right now, right? And there's probably a process in most organizations for doing that yourself. So wouldn't it be great to have a little video you could send instead of having to go track down that T4 for everybody? Sherry, did you have anything to add here?
No, I think that's excellent. And the only thing that I would want to add is that thinking of tasks that we don't do often, I just wanted to remind people that oftentimes those tasks are actually onboarding new employees. So many managers don't actually onboard often, which is a great thing. It could be a great thing. It's also a great thing when you're onboarding a lot and you're growing too. But it's just one of those things to remember that they might not have done it for a long time. So we've got to also set the expectations and help them navigate the onboarding process.
Great. Yeah, people you don't think about that. Especially with a company that has a lot of new employees, it doesn't mean that each of the people managers have, might be, like you say, 4 years between the time yeah. Okay, everybody ready? Oh, that was so fast. I like it. I was like imagining you with your finger right over the keypad there. So it's eight wins this time.
Hey, that's me.
It's not, by the way, it's not you.
Oh, it's not me. Dang.
You can talk.
I can't read. No, you go for it.
Well, I don't know if you are, I'd love to hear about it in the chat, but if any of you are familiar with a podcast called Maintenance Phase, there's 2 hosts, Michael Hobbs and Aubrey Gordon. And it's such an excellent program. It's mainly about health, but they talk a lot about anti-fat bias. And I just read Aubrey Gordon's book called What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. And it's really been a learning experience for me to understand how to make people, like, I hadn't expected a lot of what I read in that book. It's a little bit clunky me explaining it right now because it's all very new to me, but it's a new learning that I'm really appreciating having had access to. The podcast is called Maintenance Phase. So my gateway podcast was called You're Wrong About. That's another one that Michael Hobbs co-hosts, both excellent, learning a lot of new things. Yes, you're wrong about, that's correct. But it's really what we talked about at the beginning is we really want everyone to feel that they belong to an organization. And I think we've come a long, long way, but we do have a very long way to go. Making sure, like, we work with our clients so that they want to present videos about the organization. So it's very important in those videos that we make sure that we have a diverse set of employees represented in those videos, so that it doesn't look like, oh, I look at these videos and I don't feel like I belong here. And that's like that's that imprinting, right? That immediate reaction. We also want to think about scenarios where people might feel as though they don't belong. I actually put information about Aubrey Gordon's book up on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and someone actually wrote in the comments about having to try, a woman who was told in front of others to try on a men's XXL vest, and that she was feeling embarrassed because it wasn't fitting, and she had to go through this in front of her colleagues. When she goes to events, there was like a go-karting event, and she was concerned she wouldn't fit in the go-kart. And then everyone was asking her to participate and kind of joking around with her, but giving her a bit of a hard time. And we don't maybe think through these things, but they're so important to think through. We also want, it goes hand in hand, I think, with feeling like you belong and feeling like you're safe, is having a place and a process for reporting violence and harassment, and many different options for reporting. There's tons of tech tools now that will allow people to talk to them. I think one's called Talk to Spot. That's one I've seen in the past. I don't know a ton about it, but if you look that up, maybe they also have competitors out there and you can look at what's being offered. But offering that process for being able to report is going to be very, very helpful to your employees if they're having issues. We also want to think about introverts, right? Like, if you're introverted, it's not only going to affect your onboarding because you're being talked to a lot, like, you want to be able to go back and reinforce. And I think that's one way platforms like First 30 help, because you take in the people learning and then you can go back, but also thinking about how you might report if something is going wrong and you feel uncomfortable. You might want a different type of reporting than speaking to someone. I think that when we are in an organization, and it's really important, Sherry and I know we agree on this, Sherry, it's very important as an organization to have no tolerance for abuse in the workplace. But when we state this to people and they have maybe a smaller problem, or maybe like some of the issues we were talking about before with the vest and the go-kart situation, that's not something they want to think the organization is going to have no tolerance for. So thinking how we say we'll handle the situation and will be constructive rather than no tolerance, because maybe less people will come forward about these everyday issues that might be affecting them if they think that something really dramatic is going to happen as a result of that.
I think one of the biggest keys in these last couple of points is actually providing examples and actually providing specific, demonstrated behaviors of what is accepted, what is not accepted, so people can really understand what does that mean. Being overly clear, being overly articulate on some of these things is really, really helpful, because then people will still raise their voice when they need to, and they will provide constructive feedback and whatnot, and they will have a better understanding of that line.
Okay. Everybody ready? What's next? You have to remember what we didn't talk about now.
I know. It's getting harder.
Oh, just a minute. I feel bad because I wasn't at the end. Oh, we got it. Number 3.
Number 3. Okay. That's you.
That is me. We're going in the wrong. No, that's good. I just have to get, I don't often use notes when I'm presenting, but because we're not presenting in order, I'm like, oh, I have to refresh my memory. Just have to grab that. I don't know. Anyone else on here have teenagers? Because when you look at the room and you see a disaster, then you feel like, I just want an explanation for this, and I want to know. So if your teenager looked at you and said, Mom, Dad, I know my room looks like a mess right now. There's laundry everywhere, but here's what's going to happen next. And check in with me in 2 days and this room will be clean. But like, I know that's never happened to any parent anywhere, but here's to hoping. So that's all, that's to say as an example, that if you start in an organization, it can be a logistics nightmare, right? So I really think that what's important is to make sure that we're very clear with people about how we're going to solve the issue, how we're going to address it, solve it, and what the timeline will be, because we've all shown up for a job. We don't have our computer, we don't have our phone, we don't have maybe some equipment we need to do our job, and the tools we need. So now we need our organization to kind of give us a timeline and set expectations, because it just piles on, to use a phrase that matches the picture, it kind of piles on when we don't have what we need and no one's really giving us the answers we need. And also we don't know who else to go to help us figure it out. By the way, that's my favorite line that I use with my kids when they are trying to, like when they're asking me to do something for them that I really feel they should be able to do themselves, figure it out. But I think that's very good to do as a parent, but very bad to do when you're onboarding new people that don't have the, they don't have the relationships in the organization and they don't know who, where to get what. So I really think that this goes above and beyond the specific situation. I think as a culture, businesses should encourage their employees to have relationships with support functions that go beyond when you need something, right? So we all go to IT when our phone breaks, but do we include them if we buy donuts for the team one day, or we're doing something fun, or we're entering a lottery together or something? We tend not to think about other departments outside of our own, but I do think that it's really important, even if it's just to go say hi, on a Friday morning as you're making your rounds in the business. And I know that's not as easy now with COVID and working from home, but just reach out to them every once in a while, see how they're doing.
Can I interject there? Because I've got a story about this, and Marla, who's on this call, will know this very well. So where I worked at one point and where she still works, the corporate functions were actually called team support. And I thought that change in language was really powerful, because it helped people understand, like, we're a team and we're here to support you. And it really encouraged that open door for some of those, elusive back office functions that sometimes people aren't really comfortable calling. So anyways, I just wanted to comment on that because I thought it could be helpful to break down the barrier.
For sure. I think that's great. Like even inviting these team members to one of your team meetings, right? Where you're talking about what your objectives are, especially, can be really helpful. And so they can see how they fit into the bigger picture. You got some love there, Sherry.
Oh, good.
So I'm not seeing all the comments, but I see people making a lot of them. So thanks. I'll have to take a look through after. Help new employees understand the expectations, like I talked about before, and set a realistic timeline. And then keeping the lines of communication open. So I know there's so many times where I've been in a new organization. It's like, I don't have my laptop day 1. I don't have it day 2. I was promised it midway through day 2. And then I hear nothing. There's crickets. And then I'm waiting. But just giving them a realistic timeline. I can use the example. I ordered a new washer because ours broke. And they called me last week and said it was going to be delayed by a week. But then they called me again and made sure I knew that it was going to be for sure delivered tomorrow. So that made me feel good, right? I'm like, okay, I'm confident this is going to happen now. show new employees if things are going wrong. You don't want that imprinting to turn out really badly, right? You still want to build that really positive belief system about how your business functions. Because if they see things falling apart everywhere around them, it might give them the idea that maybe they won't be as efficient as they might be otherwise, right? When we start in an organization that's really efficient, we know that we should be efficient too in order to belong in that organization. Mm-hmm. So we want to show them different areas and examples in the business where things are functioning extremely well, to demonstrate that, it is a very good organization for how well they're functioning and how efficiently things run. Okay.
Awesome.
Ready? You have to figure out what we have left. I don't even know anymore. I think there's 2 left.
I just saw a 9. I saw a 9. Okay.
Okay. I saw really 3, but we've already done that. Okay.
That really is me. Okay.
Yeah.
Shutters. So actually, I have to say, maybe a bit creepy, but when I go walking at night, I love when people have their lights on in their windows, and I can kind of get a little sneak peek into their houses and into their lives. And I'm like,
that's so funny.
Paint my wall that color. Anyway, so the shutters actually is really about how you can help create that sneak peek inside your organization before the person starts. So it's really about helping to generate some excitement about your company prior to the person actually starting there. And we've got a few tips actually on how to do that. So one of them is to actually create and distribute a pre-boarding guide with information about what are the logistics of my first day? Who do I meet with? Where do I go? Will I have lunch with somebody? Should I bring my lunch? Is there a fridge? Do I bring it in a lunch bag with an ice pack? Like all the things that you have no idea about when you're starting a new job. Also setting some expectations on the first day, the first week. Will I be expected to be there all day? I've got my kids' music lesson after work, but perhaps I have to stay late one of the days. So making sure people really understand that. Where are the working sites? So where do I show up? Is there parking? Do I have to pay for parking? If I take public transportation, how do I get there? What bus route goes in front of your building, et cetera? And some of that might have been figured out through the interview process, but even where there is on-site working still, some of those interviews are still being done virtually. So really, really important. What's the dress code? What should I wear? All those kinds of great things that people might have a little bit of stress and anxiety about prior to their first day. And then it's also really helpful to help generate that excitement. So you can create a sequenced email campaign almost for new hires before their start date. And maybe you have like a couple of fun facts. So every day there's one fun fact about your business. And maybe, this happens right after their offer letter is signed, but it really helps create that engagement right from the get-go. And it really helps to get people excited about your workplace, and it creates that buzz.
I would just add to that, Sherry. So Massimo's saying that he's done a lot of this stuff. So Massimo, if you have any suggestions that we've overlooked in terms of what to put in that pre-boarding guide, by all means, please add them to the chat. When it comes to this automated email campaign, what you might want to consider is that it can be automated. So you could create like 5 fun facts that go out every couple of days. And there are platforms you can use where you enter that person's email in that address, and it just automatically every few days, there are emails that come out to them. And sometimes when we're sitting in various functions, we don't really know about the technology that can support these different things. So that that's something that we do with our clients. So if you ever want some advice about that, I'm happy to point you in the directions of some platforms. And I think that some of them start off as free. So your organization wouldn't even have to pay for those. But anyway, I thought I'd jump in, Sherry, sorry, and say that. You just have to make sure you change them with updated information as things change in the organization, that's all.
Very true. And I think that's a really good point, because sometimes when we wear the HR hat, or if we wear the hat that we're responsible for onboarding, we want to do a lot of this stuff, but we just don't have the time, and it feels like a bit of an administrative nightmare. So there's lots of ways to automate this stuff, and Amy's totally brilliant at that. So, and she's
I
also
try.
she's brilliant, and she's very generous with her time. So really, legitimately, don't hesitate to reach out. And then the next thing is, I think the buddy system is something that a lot of organizations have incorporated into their onboarding. But what about introducing the buddy even before the person starts? So having them actually call the individual prior to the start date. I remember, like, the example that's coming to my head, it is not a work example, but when I was moving to university and living in residence, and I remember my roommate called me, and it just totally broke down that barrier of, what are they going to be like? Who are they? It settled my nerves a little bit. I have one friend there,
Yeah.
this creates that I have one friend there already. And I think that's really something that people really like.
And they can ask all those embarrassing questions that they don't want to ask of their manager too, right? Like, what do I wear? What time does everybody show up? Like, really, what time, right? And what time, I think that it's a really great way to get people introduced. Okay, I'm afraid we only have time for one more. We have a few left, but does anyone want to choose the very last one? Okay, one. We got it. All right. Any of you guys if you're not on LinkedIn with us, by the way, by all means, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. A couple of weeks ago, I put up a post about this, so you guys might be familiar if we're already connected, but I started a waitressing job in Medicine Hat, Alberta, at Earl's Restaurant, if any of you guys are familiar with it, way back when. Mm-hmm. And I remember the manager said to me, Amy, I'm going to be following you around for the first few weeks. And I was like, oh, God, that doesn't sound like fun. But he's like, but I'm going to follow you around and I'm going to be pointing out every single thing that you do right. And that just always stuck with me. And you know what? The thing is, he did it. And he followed me around and said, Amy, I noticed that you took out the garbage 3 times tonight. That was so helpful. Amazing. I noticed that you helped this kid into their high chair. That was, so nice of you to do that. Like, thank you so much. You're making a really big difference to the team. And it just it made me feel so good. It filled me with confidence. And I just knew that if I did good things, that they were going to see them and give me the feedback. And guess what? He gave me some constructive feedback too, but who knew, right? Like, who knew? I felt so good. And it made me want to go to work every single day and to do really great things every single day. So I think that it's really about explaining and creating that culture with the people managers about the benefits of positive reinforcement, right? And explaining to them, like I said in that story, the difference that it could make to a new team member. Sherry and I always create onboarding guides for managers when we work with our clients, and we include this recommendation within it. So creating that, we talked about like a pre-boarding guide. We also really are big believers in creating that the manager guide as well. That can be really useful. And then encourage managers to meet with new employees. And tell them and make this part of the discussion, right? We talked about those check-ins. This should be like, let's talk about all the things you're doing right since you started. So that can be just a great way for a new employee to start getting that positive feedback. And it's structured in case, people managers are busy people too. So they might not always think of it, but it's actually built into that program where they're going to check in with them. That can really help. And then to change the culture or to introduce this into the culture, we recommend running internal marketing campaigns. We run internal marketing campaigns with some of our clients to talk about the onboarding program that we're building. You could also talk about this as a feature of how you work with your, team members and what has your team done right today. Maybe you have an opportunity for people to talk about it. Maybe you have an awards system where teams or individuals are rewarded for doing really great things. A lot of companies do have that, but then boiling it down to that level of that individual interaction when someone starts their job can really change the outcome for a new employee. Okay, well,
Amy, do we
I'm,
have time to answer one question that came in the Q&A?
yeah, of course. Yeah, we do. We have like 1 minute. Yeah.
Okay. So this question is from Precious, and she says, I'm new to this organization and I'm wondering how I can bring HR closer to an organization that has employees working at different hours all over the clock in different locations. And so I think that's a really important one because it is about creating culture and bringing people together, even though they might be distanced. And so one thing I will shamelessly plug First 30 because I do think that the First 30 platform is an opportunity to do that because it allows for consistency in the experience, regardless of where you work and when you work. I think just really understanding what that consistency in messaging is and trying to automate and create tools that everybody has access to so that they can feel a part of it. You could do video introduction calls. So even though I'm not working at the same time, I might drop you a video introduction call and then you can respond with a video introduction call so that you're meeting team members, even though you're not necessarily having face-to-face. So there are opportunities to create that consistency and also to create a friendliness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to have to kind of we went right back to number 1. So close your eyes for a minute if you don't want to have to see all the slides because I have to get to the end of the presentation. So there you go, Sherry. So thanks so much for coming, guys. We'll just close off here.
You bet. So this is a very unscientific measure of success when we're looking at how well and how effectively are we onboarding new team members. And I often just listen for a change in their language. So if we think about when somebody first starts, often they'll provide feedback about the company or they'll talk about the company and they'll say you, they, them. And as soon as they start to change that language from you, they, them, and me as an individual to we, that's when you start to know that they're really feeling a part of the team, that they're really feeling that connection and that ownership to the company. So just if you are onboarding with new people, this is unscientific, but I have witnessed it many, many, many times. So I promise you will likely see that slight shift in language, and that's when you know, like, okay, it's sunk. They're part. They're part
of the organization now.
Yeah.
So again, thanks for coming. We'll follow up with an email so that you can book your onboarding audit. We'll also include in that some the outplacement pricing so that you can see that as well if you need those services too. So you can expect that. If you want to look, if these sessions, we have all these sessions, we actually post to First 30, so www.first30ready.com. So you can go to our website, you can find past sessions, just click on HR events in the menu, or it will be HR resources and then HR events, and you can get this replays of some of our previous sessions. We did an onboarding panel a few months ago where Sherry was in it, and we had some other leaders on the call, which went really well. We recently did one for those of you in Ontario on the Working for Workers Act, so you can have a look at that. You can download resources from the website, so take a look at what we have there. And of course, please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn, to reach out to us if you have questions. But we are really grateful for you for coming. And like we said, if you felt like the learning was like you learned something and that you are able to do it, we would highly encourage you to make a small donation if you can. Like I said, we put the Red Cross information at the very beginning of this chat. You might have to go back a ways, but we really appreciate it. And we were so grateful for all your really active participation. We're sorry we couldn't get to all the comments, and thank you so much for your kind words there.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.